I live in a modest house near the edge of a dense forest. The neighborhood is quiet, the kind of place where people wave but don't stop to chat. I moved here 6 months ago for the solitude. Working remotely as a freelance graphic designer, I thought the isolation would be good for creativity. I didn't expect it to also come with a creeping unease. It started small. One evening, I was finishing up a design project when I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye. My desk faces a large window overlooking the forest. The sun was setting, casting long shadows through the trees. At first, I thought it was just a deer or some other animal. They're common here. But when I looked closely, I saw a figure standing just at the tree line. A man. He wasn't moving, just standing there, half shrouded by the fading light and the thick trees. I couldn't make out any details, but I got the distinct impression he was looking right at me. I stood up, heart pounding, and stepped closer to the window. As I did, he turned and walked into the forest without a sound. I told myself it was nothing. A hiker who got turned around, maybe. I went back to work, but I kept glancing at the window. The shadows seemed darker, deeper. The next few days were uneventful. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing. Then, late one night, I was woken up by a noise outside. It was faint, like a branch snapping underfoot. My bedroom window faces the backyard, which borders the same forest. I got up and cautiously peered through the blinds. At first, I didn't see anything. The backyard was bathed in pale moonlight, the trees looming like silent sentinels. Then I noticed it. A figure standing just beyond the tree line. My stomach dropped. It was the same man. He was closer now, standing in the open, his face still obscured by shadows. I couldn't make out any features, but I felt his gaze like a weight pressing down on me. I wanted to call the police, but what would I say? "There's a man standing in the woods?" By the time they got here, he'd be gone. I stayed by the window, watching, until he finally turned and disappeared into the trees. The next morning, I found footprints in the dirt near the edge of the forest. They were large, the kind of boots someone might wear for hiking. The sight of them made my skin crawl. I started keeping all the curtains drawn. I told myself it was just a precaution, but the truth was, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. One evening, a friend called to catch up. I hadn't told anyone about the man. It felt too bizarre to explain. As we chatted, I heard a faint tapping sound. I froze, mid-sentence. The tapping continued, slow and deliberate. It was coming from the front door. I muted the call and crept to the door, my heart pounding. Through the peephole, I could see nothing. Just the empty porch and the dark night beyond. I waited, holding my breath. The tapping stopped, replaced by a low scraping sound, like someone dragging something heavy across the porch. Then, silence. The next morning, I found deep scratches on the front door, like something sharp had been dragged across it. My stomach churned as I traced the marks with my fingers. That night, I barely slept. I stayed up, watching the windows, jumping at every little noise. Around 3 a.m., I heard it again, the faint crunch of footsteps outside. This time, I grabbed my phone and called the police. While I waited, I stayed crouched by the window, peeking through a small gap in the curtains. The man was back. He was standing closer than ever, near the edge of the porch. The porch light illuminated him enough that I could see his face, or rather, the mask he was wearing. It was crude, made of burlap, with holes cut out for eyes. He just stood there, staring at the house. My skin prickled with fear. When the police arrived, their headlights swept across the yard, but the man was gone. They searched the area but found nothing. They told me to call again if he came back. The following day, I installed security cameras around the house. For a while, things were quiet. I started to believe it was over. Then one morning, I found a new note taped to the front door. "You can't hide forever." My blood ran cold. I checked the security footage, but it showed nothing unusual. Whoever left the note had avoided the cameras. That night, I barricaded the doors and windows, keeping a baseball bat within arm's reach. Around midnight, the cameras alerted me to movement in the backyard. I pulled up the live feed on my phone. The man was there, standing just out of range of the motion-activated lights. He tilted his head as if he knew I was watching. Then he stepped forward, triggering the lights. In his hand, he held a small, rusted axe. I called the police, my hands trembling. The operator stayed on the line as I described what I was seeing. The man didn't move, even as the distant sound of sirens grew louder. Only when the flashing red and blue lights appeared did he retreat into the woods. The police did a thorough search this time, combing through the forest with dogs and flashlights. They found nothing. One of the officers suggested I stay somewhere else for a while. I packed a bag and went to stay with a friend in town. At my friend's house, I started to feel a fragile sense of safety returning. We joked about it over coffee one morning, saying maybe it was just some strange local trying to scare me off. But deep down, I couldn't shake the image of that burlap mask or the deliberate way he'd moved. One night, a week into my stay, I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating. It was a notification from my security cameras. I hesitated before opening the app, bracing myself for what I might see. The feed from the camera showed nothing at first. The backyard was still, bathed in the faint glow of moonlight. Then, movement, just a flicker at the edge of the screen. The man stepped into view. He moved closer to the camera, the burlap mask filling the screen. He raised a hand, holding up a sign. "Did you think I wouldn't find you?" My stomach dropped. I called the police again, but by the time they arrived, the man was gone. The only evidence was the sign he'd left behind, propped against the porch railing. I decided it was time to leave for good. I couldn't stay in a place where I felt so vulnerable. I found a short-term rental in another town and arranged for a moving company to collect my things. Returning to the house to pack was nerve-wracking, but I brought a few friends with me for support. We worked quickly, stuffing my belongings into boxes. The forest loomed just beyond the yard, silent and oppressive. Every now and then, I thought I saw movement among the trees, but I told myself it was just my imagination. As we loaded the last box into the truck, one of my friends froze, staring at the edge of the woods. "Did you see that?" she whispered. I turned to look. For a moment, I saw nothing. Then there he was, the man in the burlap mask standing just beyond the tree line. He didn't move, but his presence was enough to send us scrambling into the truck. We drove away, leaving the house and the man behind. The new rental was in a small but bustling town far from the woods. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The neighbors were friendly, the streets were well lit, and the nearest forest was miles away. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. One evening, as I was settling into bed, I received a text from an unknown number. The message was short but chilling. "You can't run forever." I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. How had he found me? I checked all the locks, drew the curtains, and sat in the living room with every light on. The hours crawled by, every creak of the house setting my nerves on edge. Around 2 a.m., there was a knock at the door. It was soft at first, almost hesitant, but then it grew louder and more insistent. My stomach churned as I crept toward the door, clutching a kitchen knife. Peering through the peephole, I saw nothing but darkness. The streetlights outside cast long shadows, but no one was there. I waited, my breath shallow until the knocking finally stopped. The next morning, I found another note taped to the door. This one was different. Instead of a taunt, it was a single word scrawled in jagged, uneven letters. Soon. Days turned into weeks, and the man seemed to vanish again. I started therapy to deal with the lingering trauma, but the fear never truly left. Every time I walked into a room, I checked the windows. Every time I left the house, I scanned the streets for anything or anyone out of place. One night I woke up to the sound of shattering glass. My heart raced as I grabbed my phone and crept toward the source of the noise. It was the living room window. A rock lay on the floor amidst the broken glass, and outside, in the shadows, I saw him, the burlap mask, the tilted head, the axe gleaming faintly in the moonlight. This time, I didn't wait. I ran out the back door and into the street screaming for help. Lights flicked on in neighboring houses, and someone called the police. By the time they arrived, the man was gone, but this time, they found something. In the bushes near the house, they discovered a small campsite. There were wrappers, footprints, and a notebook filled with incoherent scribbles. The only legible words were my name, written over and over. I moved again, this time to a city far from any forests or small towns. I live in a high-rise now, with security guards and cameras at every entrance. For the first time in a long while, I feel safe. But sometimes, late at night, I think about the man in the burlap mask. I wonder if he's still out there watching, waiting, and I wonder if one day he'll find me again. Weeks passed in relative calm, but the shadow of fear never left. I tried to re-establish a sense of normalcy, joining a gym, meeting people at a nearby cafe, and focusing on freelance projects. However, the unease remained, like an itch I couldn't scratch. One particularly cold winter night, I was walking back from the gym when I felt it. That unmistakable sensation of being watched. I stopped mid-step, my breath visible in the frigid air, and glanced over my shoulder. The street was empty, save for the dim glow of flickering streetlights. I quickened my pace, the sound of my boots crunching on the snow echoing unnervingly loud. When I finally reached the apartment building, I darted through the lobby, nodding to the security guard who gave me a curious look. The elevator ride felt interminable, every ding amplifying my anxiety. Reaching my apartment, I locked the door and checked the security feed from the cameras in the hallway. Nothing. My mind played cruel tricks, planting seeds of doubt in the mundane. The following morning, a peculiar package awaited me at the front desk. The concierge handed it over with a polite smile, unaware of the dread pooling in my stomach. It was a small, nondescript box, but the handwriting on the label was unmistakable. My name, scrawled in jagged letters, just like the notes. I opened it with trembling hands once safely in my apartment. Inside was a single item, a photograph. It was a picture of me, taken just the night before, walking home from the gym. My heart raced as I realized the angle perfectly matched where I'd sensed I was being watched. Beneath the photograph was a note, the writing sharp and chaotic. "I'm closer than you think.